German army entered the Second World War with the belief that the 3.7 cm caliber anti-tank guns would be sufficient to deal with enemy tanks. They quickly realised that this gun was barely adequate, and in many cases almost useless when dealing with stronger enemy armour. Early tank guns also found themselves in a similar situation. Having to address the situation, and somewhat in desperation, the Germans turned to what they had at hand. Luckily for them, they had a large number of available 8.8 cm anti-aircraft guns that had excellent ballistic properties and proved to be very good at taking out the most well-protected tanks. Too often, the German ground forces would turn to the 8.8 cm guns to turn the day in their favour in the early stages of the war. After 1942, their role as anti-tank weapons was somewhat diminished, but they remained in use up to the end of the war. Following their defeat in the First World War, the Germans were forbidden from developing various weapons, including anti-aircraft guns. To avoid this, companies such as Krupp simply began cooperating with other arms manufacturers in Europe, including the Swedish Bofors armament manufacturer. In September 1928, Krupp was informed that the German army wanted a new anti-aircraft gun, and the 8.8 cm caliber was set as a bare minimum. By the end of September 1932, Krupp delivered 2 prototypes. After a series of firing and driving trials, the guns proved to be more than satisfying, and, with some minor modifications, were adopted for service in 1933 under the name 8.8 cm Flugabwehrkanon 18, or, more simply, Flak 18. This gun is often referred to as the 88 in modern literature. This gun was quite an orthodox design in essence, but what made it different was that it could be mass-produced relatively easily. Most of its components did not require any special tooling, and companies that had basic production capabilities could produce them. The precise production numbers are unknown and differ greatly between sources, but in general, it is believed that around 20,000 were built by the end of the war. Besides the original Model 18, Germany introduced 2 more versions. The 36 version introduced several changes, with the largest being the simplified and easier to build barrel, while the 37 version received specially designed directional dials to help during anti-aircraft operation. The 8.8 cm gun and its trunnion were positioned on a large cross-shaped platform. It consisted of the central part, where the base for the mount was located, along with 4 outriggers. The front and the rear outriggers were fixed to the central base, while the side outriggers could be lowered during firing. The 8.8 cm gun had a horizontal sliding breech block, which was semi-automatic. It meant that, after each shot, the breech opened on its own, enabling the crew to immediately load another round. This provided a good rate of fire of up to 15 rounds per minute when engaging ground targets, and up to 20 rounds per minute for aerial targets. For the anti-tank role, the crew would use the Zielfernrohr 20 direct telescopic sight. It had 4 times magnification and a 7.5 degree field of view. With a muzzle velocity of 840 milliseconds, the maximum firing range against ground targets was 15.2 kilometers, meaning the 88 was sometimes used as indirect fire artillery. The gun elevation and traverse were controlled by using 2 hand wheels located on the right side. This whole gun platform was moved using 2 two-wheeled dollies. While these units were supposed to be removed during firing, the crew would often not remove them, as it was easier to move the gun quickly. This was only possible when engaging targets at low gun elevations. Initially, the 8.8 cm guns were not provided with an armoured shield for crew protection. By 1941, most 8.8 cm flaks that were used on the front line were supplied with a 10 mm thick frontal shield. The crew of this gun had at their disposal several different types of ammunition. For engaging soft ground targets, the 9.4 kg heavy high explosive round with a 30-second fuse would be used. For dealing with tanks, A 9.5 kilogram heavy anti-tank round could penetrate 105 millimeters of 30-degree angled armor at 1 kilometer. There was also an option to use the rare tungsten cord or the hollow charge anti-tank rounds. The former could penetrate some 103 millimeters of armor at 1 kilometer, while the latter, regardless of the range, was able to penetrate 165 millimeters of armor. The 8.8 centimeter Flak had a huge crew of 11 men. These included a commander, 2 gun operators, 2 fuse setter operators, a loader, 4 ammunition assistants, and the driver of the towing vehicle. A well-experienced crew needed 2 to 2.5 minutes to prepare the gun for firing. Despite having great anti-tank potential, the 8.8 cm guns were initially not considered for anti-tank use. In all fairness, the Germans at that time were quite aware that, given its size and weight, the 8.8 cm did not possess some of the desired characteristics of an anti-tank gun. Its large size made it difficult to hide from the enemy, and it needed a half-track to be moved around. The crew could also barely move it around by pushing it, if at all. The initial lack of a gun shield and large number of crew meant that it was vulnerable to even rifle fire from infantry. However, the first combat experience with the 8.8 cm guns would make the German army officials change their attitude. When the Spanish Civil War broke out in 1936, Germans dispatched the so-called Condor Legion to support the nationalist side of the conflict. This included a few 8.8 cm guns. The first ever recorded usage of the 8.8 cm guns against enemy armour occurred on the 11th of May 1937, when 2 enemy T-26s were engaged near Toledo using HE shells. After that, the 8.8 cm Flak guns were used extensively against ground targets. The performance of the gun during the war in Spain was deemed satisfying, as it possessed good range and firepower. The 8.8 cm fired in anger next during the Polish campaign in September of 1939. On the 10th of May 1940, the Germans launched a massive invasion of France through Belgium and the Netherlands. It is here that the 8.8 cm legend as a tank hunter by excellence was born. The Germans were fully aware that the majority of French tanks were protected with armour thicknesses of around 40 millimeters. What the German army intelligence failed to find out was the existence of the well-protected Char B-1 and Matilda II tanks. Luckily, for the Germans, they could call on the Luftwaffe anti-aircraft forces that were armed with the 8.8 cm guns in large numbers. However, the use of the 8.8 cm in the anti-tank role during the campaign was a rather rare occurrence. On one such occasion on the 17th of May, a battery from the 38th Flak Regiment, while holding defensive positions near Montcornet, managed to destroy a few Char B-1 tanks. The first, which received a hit in the rear hull, suffered damage to the engine which led to an internal explosion. The second B-1 was hit in the rear drive sprocket and the turret. An engagement that occurred on the 21st of May near Arras involved General Rommel's 7th Panzer Division and cemented the 8.8 cm Flak guns' fame. The German formations, forcing a rapid advance, left their flanks exposed to a potential Allied counter-attack. Seeing an opportunity, the Allies launched their attack, spearheaded by the British 1st Tank Brigade, which had some 86 tanks. Opposite them were Rommel's 7th Panzer Division. The Allied attack was initially successful, as the British tanks proved immune to fire from the German 3.7 cm anti-tank guns. Disaster was avoided, as Rommel gathered all available artillery he could muster, including some 8.8 cm guns. With this combined firepower, the British attack was stopped, and they were then forced to retreat. Their tanks would then be subject to extensive bombing raids, losing many in the process. During the engagement, the Germans lost at least one 8.8 cm Flak gun, but managed to destroy 4 Matilda tanks. At the end of the campaign, the 8.8 cm Flak guns would see action against the last defences of the Maginot Line. The African theatre of war is probably the best known of the 88's hunting grounds during the war. The Germans were initially not interested in the developments in Africa, but after the failed Italian attempt to conquer Egypt in 1940, they had to help their southern ally. In early 1941, the Afrika Korps, under the command of General Erwin Rommel, reached Africa. While the German units were equipped with towed anti-tank guns and even some self-propelled anti-tank vehicles, their numbers were insufficient to provide full protection against enemy armour. To bolster their firepower, the 8.8cm guns were often used as a mobile force intended to provide fire support for the advancing panzer units. At that time, the German Air Force had temporary air supremacy, and thus these guns could be allocated for other roles. During Operation Battle Axe, which began on the 15th of June 1941, the 8.8cm guns managed to inflict huge British casualties, including 90 destroyed tanks. On another occasion, a few 8.8cm guns from the 33rd Flak Regiment managed to take out 54 tanks, 6 self-propelled vehicles, 2 armoured cars, at least 3 artillery batteries, 4 anti-tank guns, and around 120 trucks in 1 month. The 8.8cm crew spent around 613 armour-piercing rounds. This means that, on average, some 11 rounds were needed to destroy an enemy tank. Another flak unit that was active during the fighting at Gazala was the 3rd Battery of the 43rd Flak Regiment. On the 27th of 1942, the unit was reported to have destroyed 9 enemy tanks after firing 109 armour-piercing rounds. The following day, after holding a defensive position supported by 5cm PaK-38s, the British attacked with a force consisting of up to 20 tanks. When the Germans attacked the Soviet Union, the situation with the ineffectiveness of the tank guns once again recurred, but on a much larger scale. Given the almost total destruction of the Soviet Air Force in the first months of the war, the flak units were frequently used in engaging ground targets. The large 8.8cm flak, in particular, proved deadly to most targets engaged. In the early stages of the German invasion, one flak battery was tasked with defending positions around the city of Dobno. On the 27th of June 1941, these positions were assaulted by the Soviet tanks. The first tank engaged was likely a KV-2, which tried to destroy the 8.8cm gun emplacement. The tank was first immobilized and then was hit with several more rounds on the turret. In quick succession, 2 more tanks were taken out. 4th tank rushed toward the town, and while it was hit a few times, the 8.8cm rounds failed to penetrate its armour. It was eventually immobilized and finally destroyed. By the end of the day, 8 Soviet tanks, many of which were heavy tanks, were taken out. In another instance, at the start of September 1941, elements from the 701st Flak Regiment took up a defensive position near Home. The Soviets attacked the German position supported by 6 tanks. The flak guns opened fire at ranges between 1.5 and 1.8 kilometres, scoring several hits on the enemy tanks. While 1 tank was immobilized, the remaining tanks retreated to their original positions. At this range, the 8.8cm rounds failed to penetrate enemy armour. During the morning of 3rd of September, a lone KV tank attacked the German line. After being hit several times at ranges of 1.5 kilometres, its crew decided to pull back. On the 4th of September, 2 more tanks were destroyed at ranges of over 2 kilometres. 1 more tank was destroyed at a range of 1.7 kilometres when it was set on fire. By the time this unit was pulled back, it had suffered only 1 killed, with several more being wounded. 4 vehicles, including a command vehicle, were lost. The 8.8cm guns managed to destroy 4 KV and 8 T-34 tanks, with 1 more damaged along with 1 artillery piece, and 2 machine gun nests. This was achieved by firing nearly 120 armour-piercing rounds, which meant, on average, 10 rounds per tank. As the 8.8cm guns proved to be one of the few weapons that could defeat the heavy Soviet tanks, they were permanently allocated to SS Panzer divisions and some ordinary Panzer divisions in late 1941. The 8.8cm was not invincible throughout, as it was a fairly large target. Thus, the Germans tried to position these in well-selected and camouflaged positions where an enemy breakthrough was expected. After 1942, the number of frontline 8.8cm guns slowly declined as more and more guns were needed to defend Germany itself from the ever-increasing Allied air raids. In addition, other more dedicated and effective anti-tank weapons were pressed into service. This does not mean that the 8.8cm stopped being used against ground targets. During the last major German offensive operation around Kursk in 1943, nearly 200 8.8cm flak guns were gathered. These guns saw extensive use during the Kursk operation, in their original role, but also as artillery or anti-tank weapons. Often, they would be employed to protect German infantry from any Soviet counterattack. They proved vital in defending an important rail line in the area of Belgorod-Kharkov in late July 1943. In the Battle for Krakow, they participated in the successful defence of German lines and contributed to the destruction of nearly 350 Soviet tanks in late August 1943. The 8.8cm flak was not that common in other theatres, such as Italy and France. During the Allied liberation of France, the most common anti-tank gun was the 7.5cm Pak-40. The Allied troops would often mistakenly attribute their tank losses to the 8.8cm when they were taken out by 7.5cm guns instead. The 8.8cm guns found their way into the Balkans as well. While a rare sight, these were used to protect against Allied bombing raids. They even saw action against ground targets. On one such occasion, a lone 8.8cm gun achieved great success when its crew managed to ambush a column of 10 Bulgarian tanks and destroyed them all near the city of Pirot in mid-September 1944. At that time, the Bulgarians had switched sides and joined the Allies against the Germans. The last action of the 8.8cm flak guns was during the defence of the German capital of Berlin. Due to most being placed in fixed positions, they could not be evacuated, and most would be destroyed by their crews to prevent capture. Even in those final days, they still managed to fight back against the nigh victorious Allies. This concludes our video on the 8.8cm flak. What do you think of this legendary tank killer? Share your opinions in the comments section. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to subscribe to stay updated on future content. If you'd like to contribute further, consider supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. Your contributions help us create more engaging videos. Until next time, stay focused and stay tuned.